we're gonna show you some crazy NBA fan altercations that you will not want to miss. Hey, what's up everybody? In this video, we're taking a look at some of the craziest NBA fan altercations in the history of the game. There have been, without a doubt, some outrageous happenings throughout league history, such as fans sprinting onto the court and even yelling out vulgar language just for a player to yell back. And I'm sure we're going to see even more of these types of fan altercations in the future once fans finally start filling back up in the stadiums. This first interaction takes place smack in the middle of a game between the Cleveland Cavs and the Houston Rockets, with the Rockets holding a 1-point lead with 6 minutes remaining in the first half. The Cavaliers inbounded the ball and were taking it up the court, and then suddenly a fan sprinted onto the court from the other end and ran all the way across the court, flashing his shirt to the crowd in an effort to pump everybody up. The fan had his arms up in the air cheering and yelling, while the officials had to literally stop the game until he was off the court. Each and every player that was trying to get back to the game was obviously not amused by it. A few security guards even ran out onto the court to try and walk the man off the floor, but he started to speed up a bit. As he sped up, the guards chased after, with the fan actually running around the court for a few seconds before finally accepting defeat and sliding down onto the ground, where about 4 to 5 guards huddled around him to get him away from the players. While an idea like this probably seemed incredibly cool to the guy in the moments leading up to his decision, he more than likely suffered punishments that don't equal the rush he got from having his few seconds of fame. I'd imagine he was either banned or suspended from the stadium for a certain amount of time, or maybe was even charged by the police if he had done something else against the rules and regulations. I guess people have a tendency to lose their minds when LeBron James is on the floor, just like what this next fan did in a game between the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers, with the game happening shortly after James made his decision to take his talents to Miami. The Heat held a 4-point lead over the Cavs with about 8 minutes left in the game, when suddenly a fan ran out onto the court to speak with LeBron James. He went directly towards him while play was still going on, which made the refs cancel action and whistle for security to get him out of the stadium. By the time the guards had gotten there to escort him away, he was seen pointing and yelling at James, probably telling him something about how he was upset with his decision to leave the Cavaliers in free agency, though we'll never know exactly what he said. Now, while he was literally being detained on the floor, from one camera angle, it seemed like LeBron walked over to the fan and gave him a small bump, maybe saying something in response to the shouting and pointing that he was doing in James' direction. But when you take a step back and look from a different angle, you'll actually see that LeBron just went over to high-five the fan and say something to him before he was taken away from the court. So I guess he wasn't saying anything hurtful after all. But this story was so big at the time, ESPN dedicated an entire show into talking about that specific fan who ran onto the court, going into detail about his personal life, a live interview, and all kinds of other random information about the man. It was revealed that he is arguably the biggest LeBron James fan in the world, as his room looks like a shrine to the king himself. He has a picture of 2 LeBrons on the blanket on his bed, there are Cleveland and LeBron signs all over his walls, and he even has a basketball net on another wall so he can practice from the comfort of his own bed. It's safe to say that this guy was obsessed with LeBron, so at least he can chill at home knowing James gave him some attention and even spoke to him. The one thing's for sure, he's never going to have that opportunity again in his life, as security banned him from Quicken Loans Arena forever, so he'll never be able to see him play unless he decides to fly out of state and see him elsewhere. Next up, we travel to Utah to see the Jazz and the Golden State Warriors go head-to-head. A member of the Warriors was driving into the lane for a layup when he was smacked on the arm with the ball popping up into the air. As soon as he was hit, he glared right over at the referee asking for a foul. That's when a whistle was blown, granting his wish.
CJ to a rolling Turioff, and Oni will get to the line, or not.
Now, pretty much everybody in the stadium stopped, and the player was getting himself ready to shoot his free throws, except for 2 Jazz players who picked up the ball and started sprinting down to the other end of the court before dunking it. The entire stadium was shocked and confused as to what was going on. But after the announcers decided to go back and look at everything, they realized that no referee had blown their whistle after he was hit on the arm. A random fan in the stadium had blown a whistle that he or she must have brought in themselves just to do something like this. Now, obviously, the Jazz players and coaches were completely fine with the incident. I mean, after all, they did just score 2 free points and get away with a blatant foul on an opposing player. But the Warriors staff and roster were beside themselves. with a few having an argument with the head referee, who should have stopped play after hearing the whistle and realizing that it wasn't any of the officials on hand. The next 10 to 15 minutes of that game was just everybody doing what they could to search out the culprit who blew the whistle so that they could reprimand him. At first, it seemed like they found him. They spotted a guy wearing a referee shirt and had a whistle around his neck. But after talking to the people around him, they determined that he was in fact not the guy who started this entire mess and just happened to be dressed up like a ref at a bad time. I understand wanting your team to win, but seriously, fake blowing a whistle to stop action so that your team can get 2 free points is a little low. Just like acting innocent until you know the player isn't able to touch you before yelling again, which is exactly what this next fan did at the end of a Golden State Warriors game. The team was in Denver to face the Nuggets and were unable to pull away with a victory, losing by 7 points and feeling a little down about themselves at that time because it narrowed the playoff series to 3 games to 2, though they were still leading. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson were walking away at the front of the team when a fan in the corner of the stands was yelling and blurting something out that clearly got the attention of Curry, who almost never argues with fans in the stands but rather messes around with them. Thompson just ignored it and kept walking, but Curry walked back to the fan, pointing him out and arguing with him for a few seconds while the man just held his hands up in the air like he wasn't even the person who said anything. It literally seemed like he got scared the second that Curry turned around, and at that point, don't trash talk if you aren't able to stand up for yourself after you get the reaction that you're looking for. But luckily for the fan, Draymond Green caught up to Curry and pulled him away and back to the locker room, doing everything he could to calm down his teammate. But then, the second Curry turned away from the fan, he put his hands down and started yelling and screaming back at Curry exactly like he was doing before, now that he figured he was protected by Draymond. Incidents like this are pretty sad if you ask me, and I think fans like that should be punished even if they didn't do anything outrageous. I mean, these NBA players are just like the rest of us, and they should be treated that way. Lastly, we have yet another Cleveland clip that features LeBron James in his final year with the team. They were going up against the Portland Trail Blazers with about 10 seconds left in the first half and were down by 6 points. This was shortly after Kyrie Irving left Cleveland and took his talents to the Boston Celtics, so there was a lot of hatred from the fans towards the two players. Every time one of them was in a game, it seemed like there was a fan asking the player where the other guy was. James was lined up on the line to watch Damian Lillard shoot 2 free throws when a fan felt that it was necessary to yell, "Yo, LeBron, where's Kyrie?" At first, James didn't even give him an answer. But as soon as Lillard sank the second free throw, LeBron yelled back, "At your mama's house."
They don't forget, do they?
No, they don't forget.
Mama's house.
It was a fitting response to a question that was asked of each of them far too often, because frankly, they were fantastic with one another on the court and were just completely different people off of it. The separation wasn't hatred, but rather a need for a different situation for both of them. But fans and the media consistently pushed the issue on it until they couldn't take it anymore. There was even a clip of a fan asking Kyrie where LeBron was, and Kyrie just shouted an expletive back at him and kept moving.
Kyrie, where's LeBron? That's my dick.
Luckily, all that talk is now dead, but every now and then you'll get one of those fans that just goes too far with things. And unfortunately, that's never going to stop anytime soon, regardless of the punishments that are dished out. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the video that appears now on your screen.